AVC, it's Travis once again. I just wanted to do another video here kind of showing more music from my upbringing to kind of show how I got to where I am today through music. And I kind of touched base on this with my video response for Shannon and her 5, 10, 15, 20 contest. But I feel like I almost did that a little hastily and definitely could have gone into more depth with that video. So this is kind of almost a redo of that. And also what I'm going to be doing is just filling in the gaps in between those years as well, to kind of just give you an overview of my life in music, you know, my musical journey, if you will. So let's get started. And I'll start when I was about 5, because that's where I feel like my musical memory kind of began. I've already told you my story about Achy Breaky Heart, you know, Billy Ray Cyrus. I don't know what it was about that, but I was really into that song when I was 5 years old, and I think it was probably coming down to like the guitar. I really liked the guitar in that song, which is kind of funny because I would later on, you know, pick up a guitar and learn how to play. So it's kind of cool to look back at, I guess. But you know, but anyway, as far as you know, growing up, I lived in what many people would call the middle of nowhere. You know, on an acre of land in the middle of the woods, and you know, just didn't have much exposure to much else other than what my mom would listen to, what my brother would listen to, and radio, really. You know, and so we didn't have MTV, you know, we didn't have VH1, and we certainly did not have internet at the time. So, you know, I like to tell people, you know, I kind of lived a sheltered childhood, but I mean that in a way that, you know, my parents weren't strict. It's just, I just didn't have much exposure to anything, you know, other than what, you know, what was available to me. And you know, that would change later on, obviously. But anyway, you know, these things, these are kind of some albums that, you know, I remember my mom listening to. You know, things I've shown in my VC intro video, but you know, Pink Floyd The Wall, you know, she had this record, but she also had gotten the CD later in probably the early 90s, when they kind of became a little more available. You know, Some Girls, the Rolling Stones, remember that one. ELO, A New World Record. Yeah, my mom was a big fan of ELO. This one, I remember she had the CD and the tape, and I remember listening to the tape quite a bit. You know, even coming home from Grandma's house, and you know, it was Meatloaf. And I remember me and my brother getting a kick out of the name, you know, Meatloaf. It was just so funny. But yeah, I mean, this was something we listened to quite a bit growing up as well. Boston, self-titled. Got some Fleetwood Mac as well. You know, it's this is, you know, my mom didn't have this CD. She had like their greatest hits, but she had this record. And so I always kind of associate this with my mother. But we listened to Fleetwood Mac a lot, you know, and she definitely loved them. And so some of these songs, you know, definitely were part of my childhood. And of course, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, you know, the Beatles, 62 to 66, she had this record as well, but you know, she got the CD, which I think it was a 1993 release, which would have been when I was about 5 years old. And yeah, so I mean, you know, we listened to this a lot. You know, this is my exposure to the Beatles, and I wouldn't get into their later stuff until much later, until I was like a teenager, which I will get into later. But I mean, we listened to this a lot, and actually, there's a story I remember. I remember being like sick as hell. Like I was, you know, fever, you know, just icky. And I remember asking my mom if she could put on her Beatles CD, because I thought it would make me feel a little bit better. So I remember laying there on the couch, sipping a Coke, and listening to the Beatles while I'm sick. You know, another one too. I don't think she had the CD, but she had the cassette, and that was Queen's Greatest Hits. You know, this kind of maroonish cover here. I remember sitting out in the backyard in the grass, and with my Walkman and the headphones, and listening to Queen. This probably wasn't when I was 5, but it was you know, sometime between 5 and 10 for sure. And just looking through these liner notes and stuff and seeing all the pictures of, you know, all their album covers and stuff. And it kept rewinding over Another One Bites the Dust. Kept listening to that over and over again. So, you know, I picked that CD up, you know, later on because that was one from my childhood and really liked it. You know, as far as my exposure to music through the radio, basically, you know, I had long bus rides, you know, sometimes over an hour back and forth to school, and we would only listen to pop radio. There was no switching of the channels at all. It was just, you know, pop radio, you know, Rick D's weekly top 40, you know, kind of stuff. So you know, go in the 90s, pick a year, look at the top songs from that year, and that was kind of what I listened to. And, you know, not all of it was bad either. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that I kind of, you know, have a connection to, you know, because that's, I think everyone kind of does almost with kind of what you grew up with is, you know, during your childhood, you're always kind of attached to in a way. But, you know, some things out of my actual collection that I have from that time that I remember listening to on the radio, especially on the bus, you know, things like REM, Losing My Religion. This is the single here. A very cool find. But, yeah, that was still getting pretty, you know, heavy airplay in the early 90s still, you know, very cool. And songs off of Full Moon Fever, a Tom Petty, you know, Free Fallin', Running Down a Dream, I Won't Back Down. Yeah, heavy airplay with that there. So, you know, things like that out of my collection I definitely remember listening to, but just countless bands that I could list off, but I'm not going to because there's just so much. But, you know, just all that kind of stuff. But, you know, that would pretty much sum up, you know, radio. And then, you know, what my brother would listen to too would be, you know, of course he's 4 years older than me. He kind of got into music a little bit quicker than I did, but, you know, obviously just being older. But anyway, you know, he would listen to a lot of the same things that were on the radio too. He would actually get the CDs of the stuff that they played on the radio. So he was subscribed to like the BMG Music Direct or whatever that was, where he would get, you know, so many CDs a month or something. And a lot of the things that he would pick out would be kind of just the popular songs at the time. But, you know, some other things I happen to remember him, you know, picking up and us listening to, things like Weird Al, the album Bad Hair Day. We listened to that together quite a bit, me and my brother. And also, he had Beck Odelay, you know, What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis. What other one? Oh, like Presidents of the United States of America, you know, their self-titled one. So, you know, those ones I remember from my brother, you know, kind of exposing me to some things, you know, and even later on then, like, he would kind of expose me to things like Pantera, Cowboys from Hell, you know, like, that was probably a little bit later on, but, you know, that's my childhood, you know, up to about when I started getting into, you know, my own music around, probably when I was about 12 or 13 or so. At the time, I was listening to stuff I don't listen to anymore. You know, a lot of rap and kind of that rock rap, you know, nu metal stuff. Limp Bizkit, Korn, Kid Rock, Eminem, that kind of stuff I was listening to quite a bit, and that kind of music kind of inspired me to want to become a DJ. And you know, it's just, you know, dream big, right, Travis, right? So it's like, you know, I got my first turntable set. You know, I had 2 turntables and a mixer, and I was going to learn how to mix and match beats and stuff like that, and scratch and all that good stuff. But, you know, at the same time, it's kind of almost a blessing because, you know, then I started getting into vinyl. So, you know, I kind of got into it almost organically, you know, in a way. But you know, the first record I remember getting on my own, I showed this in my VC intro as well, was like the Gorillaz. You know, and this kind of was, you know, hip hop still. You know, there's definitely a hip hop feel to it. So this was up my alley. But you know, when I started doing more research on the Gorillaz, I found out the lead singer was, you know, Damon Albarn, who was, you know, of course, the lead singer of Blur. And now this was kind of bridging the gap between my rap, you know, stuff, and then just going into more of the rock pop sound. And so I always kind of consider Blur to be kind of the start of a new era, I guess, in a way, where I stopped listening to things like Limp Bizkit and Korn and stuff like that. And at the same time, you know, I had my record player and going through my parents' collections. And, you know, I find things like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, you know, and I was exposed to this finally around that time. And of course that just, you know, blew my mind. And, you know, kind of a funny story about this. You know, the song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin. You know, that was my first exposure to Led Zeppelin when I was about 12 or 13. Kind of the funny story though is, you know, around that time too, I started kind of getting into the, I wouldn't say like conspiracy theory, but like kind of like the urban legends, and I would be looking up things about these albums that were like urban legends. And of course you'd probably, I mean, any Led Zeppelin fan would probably know, you know, about the backward masking, the backward messages in Stairway to Heaven. Well, you know, we didn't have Led Zeppelin 4 on vinyl yet, but the Stairway to Heaven was on this album. And so me, you know, being curious, you know, I'm putting this on the platter and I'm, you know, playing it backwards to try to decipher the hidden messages. And I'm showing all my friends and stuff, and they're just like, what are you doing? You know, like, oh man, this is crazy. But, you know, things like that. But at the same time, you know, I'm researching these urban legends, and I'm finding stuff about the Beatles, you know, the Paul is dead thing. You know, so it's kind of a strange way to get into the later Beatles. But, you know, I would be reading about all those clues and stuff that they apparently left in these albums, and I could probably still today show you, you know, point out things like on this album cover, you know, what was supposed to be a reference that Paul died. But you know, I would be actually at this time now, you know, being later on, we have internet now, and things like Napster are coming out, and you know, I'm downloading these songs and listening to them, you know, things that, you know, Lovely Rita I remember listening to, and just not so much off this album, but a lot of stuff off the White Album and stuff as well. So that was kind of my exposure into the Beatles later catalog, which, like I mentioned before, kind of blew my mind, you know, going from like the poppy I Want to Hold Your Hand to I Am the Walrus, you know. So but yeah, like the Beatles for sure, and even things like Ohio Players, Honey, you know, the song Love Roller Coaster. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but you know, the urban legend for that was during the song Love Roller Coaster, somewhere in the musical break, there's a high-pitched scream, and the urban legend was that someone was either injured or murdered in the studio, and it was some girl that was screaming. But it turns out it was probably one of the members of the band or something. But, you know, it's just like, it was just kind of more of a curiosity, kind of just for fun kind of thing. But, you know, I didn't really even believe all that stuff, you know. But going back to like the Led Zeppelin though too, I remember listening, you know, to Stairway to Heaven mostly backwards. I didn't really get to appreciate the song until a little bit later. But then, you know, that's on side 3. And, but on side 4, there's Moby Dick. And I remember playing the record, and I had my turntable at the time, which actually was that Gemini set I showed yesterday. But I had my turntable set to 45 RPM, and so I put on Moby Dick, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, it's a lot quicker, but it sounded like punk rock, and which, you know, at the time I didn't have much exposure to, but I thought that sounded killer, you know. So kind of a funny story about that Led Zeppelin 2 though. You know, but then later on around you know, I would say probably 2002-ish, you know, I kind of start fading away from the whole DJing thing. You know, I figured that it's just too much for me. I'm probably not going to be able to do it, you know, which is fine with me now. You know, it's not like dreams are shattered or anything like that. But anyway, you know, then I started kind of getting into guitar, and I remember there was a kid that had brought his guitar in for kind of like some sort of project or something. It wasn't like a show and tell, but it was kind of just like a speech almost, like he was supposed to do. And he was giving a speech on guitar, and he brought his guitar into the classroom, and he started playing this song, and you know, just with the wah pedal, you know, and it was Voodoo Child, Slight Return by Jimi Hendrix. And that was just my first exposure to Jimmy, was you know, this guy playing in my classroom. And I asked him, I was like, what song was that, you know, and stuff. He told me what it was. He's like, oh, Voodoo Child. And I just thought that sounded so crazy. And you know, of course, went home, had to download it. There was my exposure to Hendrix. You know, so that opened up a whole bunch of new doors, you know, to me. And it wasn't too long after that that I you know, had gotten my own guitar and started learning, you know, some of these songs. You know, not as good as Hendrix, obviously, but yeah, you know. But you know, around the same time too, you know, things like I'm getting exposed to stuff from my friends, and an album that was kind of big at the time was like, you know, Weezer, Maladroit. You know, so I was kind of exposed to Weezer from one of my friends, and he had actually made me copies of all their earlier albums. And I remember, you know, listening to like the Blue album for the first time, and just thinking about how awesome that was. And I remember hearing the song In the Garage, and how it started with that little harmonica, and then just that fuzzy, dirty guitar tone. I just absolutely loved that. And you know, I spent like hours trying to figure out how to do that on my guitar amp at the time. You know, I was just loved it. You know, and the other things that my friend Lee kind of exposed me to, and we listened to quite a bit, things like Primus. You know, this is Frizzle Fry, and we would heavy into Primus. I mean, just anything that we could get our hands onto, we were just totally digging it. We actually had gotten a chance to see them twice between 2003 2004. So, you know, that was kind of Weezer was my first concert experience. I did get to see them in 2002, and then I would later see Primus twice. And things like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Californication. Now this might actually kind of fit into the 90s radio stuff. You know, I remember listening to some of these songs on the radio, obviously, like the title track, Scar Tissue, things like that. But, you know, my friend Lee was really into the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and kind of exposed me to that. You know, and then being a guitarist, my logic was, you know, if I'm going to be a guitarist, I gotta know my guitars, you know, I gotta know my guitar music. And so I eventually had run out and, you know, pretty much bought, you know, things by Black Sabbath, pretty much all their early catalog, you know, Paranoid especially, remember listening to that, and Van Halen, their entire, I think, first 5 or 6 albums I think I had. You know, this one especially, you know, with Eruption, obviously, it was just like mind-blowing to me. And Metallica, you know, I'm just showing these albums, but I mean, I got all the CDs at the time, and my logic was, you know, if I'm going to be a guitarist, I gotta know this stuff, you know, I gotta know Metallica inside and out, which, now looking back, isn't necessarily true, but you know, it definitely shaped, you know, how I played guitar a little bit, you know, too. And I wouldn't consider myself like a metal guitarist now, but at the time, for sure. You know, getting a little bit older, you know, let's see, this probably would have been around the same time, I guess, probably around 2003-ish. You know, I was listening to Nirvana quite a bit. You know, I picked this one out for my contest response for Shannon. I just feel like I listen to this a lot more than Nevermind and In Utero and stuff. But, you know, around that same time is when my parents had divorced, and I was living, you know, with my mom. And, yeah, I mean, so Nirvana, you know, definitely tapped into that anguish, you know, in a way, you know, of, you know, my parents' marriage falling apart and stuff like that. So I really connected with that. And, you know, moving out, you know, living with my mom, we actually moved to a place where we actually got cable TV. So I was actually now finally, you know, I'm already, you know, 13, 14 years old here, and finally exposed to MTV and stuff. And around the same time as when the whole garage rock revival was kind of blowing up. And so I distinctly remember watching this music video before going to school. It was Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground by the White Stripes. And just thinking that was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen, and just the coolest song ever. You know, I'm pretty sure I made my mom like go out and buy that CD for me, like soon after that, you know, and I just listened to this album a lot. This was like, you know, just always playing, you know, and then, you know, being with that garage rock kind of revival thing that was kind of going on at the time, you know, the Strokes, Is This It? You know, that was another big one I really got into. The Vines, Highly Evolved. Also the Hives. I actually don't have any of the Hives CD or vinyl for that matter, but the Hives were another one too of that time. And this is around 2003 or 2002, 2003-ish. So, you know, Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf, you know, Jet, Get Born. That was kind of a big deal. Foo Fighters, One by One. You know, and then all these, you know, the Foo Fighters and stuff like this kind of would expose me to them. You know, not, well, also with Nirvana, I guess, too, but, you know, would also expose me to the Foo Fighters and their early catalog as well. You know, By the Way by Red Hot Chili Peppers, now that was just crazy stuff in the day, you know, just playing all the time. But one that, you know, if I were to pick out just one here that would stick with me probably the longest, I remember laying in bed at night, really late at night, and this is when they would start playing music videos in the early morning hours. And I remember just with the lights off, laying in bed, watching TV in my room, and all of a sudden the screen goes black and it says "Play Loud," and just it starts up this music video. It's just like this helicopter sound, and it just shows these guys getting out of a truck and they're going up on this tower, and all of a sudden it just blows up into a sky of fireworks, and it's Audioslave's Cochise music video there. And that just can you just imagine me sitting, you know, in a dark room, and all of a sudden my room is like a strobe light, you know. But Audioslave's, you know, first album there was definitely, especially with guitar as well, you know, me being a guitarist, you know, I was a huge fan of Tom Morello, still am. You know, he's just a fantastic guitarist. But you know, that exposed me to that, you know, and as I did more research on that album, you know, of course it would expose me to things like Soundgarden and Rage Against the Machine, which this, again, definitely tapped into the teen angst, you know, period of my life, just that aggression, and just where anti-authority kind of thing, you know. But also with like the Soundgarden, you know, would then expose me onto Pearl Jam, you know, and Temple of the Dog even, and later would kind of get more into like Chris Cornell's solo work. Yeah, Euphoria Morning. I really like this album. I haven't listened to it for a while, but anyway, you know, I would revisit Temple of the Dog and the Chris Cornell solo stuff a little bit later on. Wasn't really too heavy into that during like high school, but for some reason. But another thing too, you know, as a guitarist, again, this I got in April 2003. Got my first issue of Guitar World, and here it is. Now this was my first issue, and I don't know if it's like a generic kind of like first issue or what, but I mean this was like a Bible to me, and actually up until this day, I mean pretty much it still is. I mean I'm still looking through this today, 10 years later, you know, almost to the date, and I'm still pulling information out of this, you know. And you know, things like they break it down by genre, and you know, like these lists and stuff, you know, they're so subjective, but you know, it definitely exposed me to a lot more stuff, you know, like for I saved it here, bookmarked, you know, alternative, you know, first album there, Velvet Underground, Nico. You know, what's that? You know, I go check that out. Of course, you got Nevermind, you know, OK Computer by Radiohead. You know, I remember at the time, you know, we had internet again still, and downloading like Paranoid Android, you know, and just like, whoa, you know. And REM, let's see, Sonic Youth, U2, Television, Marquee Moon, that was a big one. That was a cool, like, you know, thing for me to find out of this magazine. The Pixies, The Cure, you know, things like that. I mean, and also like the classic rock page that they have in here. Let's see where it is. I didn't bookmark that one. There it is. You know, classic rock one has, you know, of course, the Black Sabbath is number one. Oh, this is classic metal, I'm sorry. But AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Judas Priest, Metallica, but the classic rock, you know, they have the Beatles, Revolver up there, and along with the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street, The Who, Who's Next, The Doors, self-titled, Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland, Dark Side of the Moon, Led Zeppelin 4, Deep Purple, Machine Head, Toys in the Attic, and Van Halen, you know, and stuff like that. I mean, so this was definitely like a guide to me discovering more albums, and then, you know, from those albums onto, you know, their other albums, and then, you know, just doing, you know, with the internet, just being able to do research and reading about these bands and stuff like that, and then just branching off from everywhere, you know. It was just such a kind of a strange way to get into music, really, but, you know, I mean, it definitely worked, and like I said, I'm still pulling things out of here that, you know, I'm still researching and stuff. So yeah, it's just amazing. But you know, it's around the same time, 2003-ish, I would, maybe it's even 2004, getting you know, exposed to a whole bunch of music. I'm subscribed to the BMG Music Direct, you know, subscription thing, whatever, where you get, you know, a whole bunch of CDs, and then you have to buy one, and then you get another one free or whatever it was. But every month they would send you a CD, and if you would buy it outright, then you'd get, you know, 2 free CDs or something like that. But one of the ones that they sent me, and the thing was that, like, you could open the box, but you couldn't open the packaging, because otherwise you would own it. If you were not interested in the CD, you had to send it back to get, you know, your money back or whatever it was. But I got a package one day, and I pulled this out, The Essential Clash. And at the time, I was like, don't know what this is, but I've heard about them, The Clash. I think I'll like it, you know. So, you know, I told my mom, I was like, you know, I'm gonna open this one because I just want to give it a try. And man, am I sure glad I did, because this, you know, totally changed a lot of things for me musically. Love the Clash, and honestly probably one of my favorite bands. No, I mean, so that was my first exposure to the Clash, which then of course opened a bunch of doors to more of like that punk rock music. You know, Ramones and Sex Pistols and stuff like that. You know, other things I remember getting off of BMG. You know, was you know, a lot of other rap. I was kind of getting it, you know, based off my like Rage Against the Machine obsession. You know, I was getting more into kind of like the old rap, hip hop, Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. You know, that I remember getting off that BMG, along with Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique, which you know, listening to this, I mean, I had their first album, Licensed to Ill, already, but then you know, I got this one, and this I just totally loved. And I remember just reading about it and just hearing it, you know, and all the different sounds that they got on there, and then you know, actually at the time being able to recognize some of the samples that they used. But there were so many other cool things that I was like, well, what's that a sample of? You know, what's that? You know, and stuff like that. It's like, you know, it exposed me to all this sometimes obscure kind of, a lot of times it would be like kind of funk or stuff like that, R&B kind of stuff, some rock. But yeah, I mean, definitely just a different way of exposure. And going along with my Rage obsession, you know, like albums like Renegades. Now this isn't their best album by any means, but you know, it's just an album full of covers. And then, you know, me researching and find out, you know, who are these songs actually by, you know. And so boom, here comes, you know, MC5, Kick Out the Jams. You know, I get exposed to that. And the Stooges, Funhouse, you know, Down on the Street. And definitely I like this version a lot more than the Rage version, but yeah, I mean, that was my exposure to that. You know, meanwhile, I have a friend named Ken who's kind of exposing me more to some of the classic rock stuff. You know, he was kind of the guy I would go to concerts with during that time, and he kind of really got me more into Pink Floyd. Apart from like The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon, you know, he exposed me to things like Wish You Were Here. This was his favorite album, and you know, I really got into that. And he also turned me on to T-Rex, Electric Warrior. I love this album, and you know, I kind of turned him on to more like the Hendrix stuff because that was kind of more what I was into. So you know, we would kind of complement each other like that, you know. But you know, moving on, you know, this is up through like 2005-ish, you know, senior year of high school in 2006, you know, I'm graduating, things like, you know, I'm still following all these bands, White Stripes, you know, I'm following Jack White with the Racketeers, you know, totally digging that, and then, I had a friend in high school that he was actually a new kid, and I don't remember where he was from, but he had started there, and he was, I mean this in a good way, he was a lot different than the rest of the kids in school, and he was also a guitarist and a songwriter and stuff, so definitely a lot different. There wasn't a lot of kids like that in my grade, at least. And I remember, you know, kind of striking up a friendship with him right before we graduated. And, you know, one of the things he gave me a CD copy of Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan. And disc 1 of the Essential Bob Dylan, which of course is, you know, all his early stuff, pretty much up through late 60s, you know, stuff. But he told me that if you ever want to become a good songwriter, listen to Bob Dylan. And you know, at the time I wasn't really, you know, concerned about becoming a songwriter at all, but and I I was like, okay, well, thanks, and stuff. And I didn't listen to him very heavily at first, but it wasn't until later that I, had put him in, and I was just like, whoa, So I mean, that was kind of my exposure to Bob Dylan. Was through my friend Chuck, and yeah, definitely. I mean, Bob Dylan's one of my favorite artists, and songwriters, period. Moving on though, I mean, like, he had actually had gone away for a little bit after graduation, and then he actually had moved back, and he called me up and he said, hey, you want to, play some music and stuff, and because we both play guitar, and we kind of started a little duo project, with him on acoustic, me on electric. We just kind of would play some songs and stuff. But he would definitely turn me on to some more music, some more like Oasis. That was one of his favorite bands. I had What's the Story, Morning Glory from my brother, but Chuck would listen to a lot of Oasis, and he would kind of show me more of that stuff, but also like the Flaming Lips. Yeah, I mean, that was, we were playing that one a lot. He also exposed me to things like Nick Drake, Pink Moon. I mean, this was one of his favorite albums for sure. And for myself, I kind of, had gotten into kind of like a psychedelic, along with like the Flaming Lips kind of thing, and discovered things like Funkadelic, Maggot Brain. So this is around 2006, 2007-ish, things like that. And then I had another friend, who just like randomly messaged me online, like on Messenger, like whatever, and was like, hey, check out this song. And he like sends me a link or something, and it's My Morning Jacket off the record, off their album Z. And at first I was like, okay, it's a cool jam, but then, about halfway through the song, it breaks into that instrumental break, and I was just sold from first listen. I was like, man, this is killer. So definitely had gotten exposed to My Morning Jacket and their early catalog, got really into them as well. Around 2007, again, went to actually see the Queens of the Stone Age in concert, and who opened for them was the Black Angels, and they totally blew my mind when I saw them. I was just so thrilled about that. After the show, I picked up a CD of theirs, this one, and a t-shirt even, and I've been a big Black Angels fan ever since, and I kind of got into kind of more of that psychedelic-y, even kind of like, like I said before, like stoner rock, not quite stoner rock, kind of like the sludge metal, kind of just that kind of stuff. But I think also like Howling Rain, Magnificent Fiend, things like that, kind of folky, rocky, kind of stuff like that. 2008, some popular albums at the time I was listening to, Beck, Modern Guilt, My Morning Jacket, again, Evil Urges, and the Black Crowes, War Paint. Those were all three that I remember listening to quite a bit. Let's see here. Okay, so other albums, a lot of this stuff was just either based off of like, me just online research and stuff. And, at this time I'm living on my own, and I'm just getting exposed to all sorts of music, on the internet. So I should mention too, when I moved out, it was the first time I got high-speed internet. So this was in 2006. So I mean, on my own now, 2008, again, going back, the Black Keys, Attack and Release, that was a complete, I think, blind buy at the time. Fleet Foxes, I got exposed to that. And let's see here, Black Mountain, kind of in the same vein as that Black Angels in a way. Black Mountain, In the Future. And kind of more of the folky kind of sound, Ray LaMontagne, This is Gossip in the Grain. I believe this came out in 2008. I didn't even check. I'm just was kind of guessing it did. So, you know, things like that. But, you know, I was definitely into at that time. Another thing too, I had read in a magazine about a dude that had recorded an album in northern Wisconsin, and he was from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I was like, what? You know, like, because that's only like an hour away from here. So, and it turns out that's Bon Iver. And so checking out that, just, you know, just based off of his connections to Wisconsin was kind of, you know, what initially got me to listen to it. But yeah, I definitely love this album. And so for Emma Forever Ago, you know, so you know, stuff like that. 2009, you know, I'm listening to all this stuff, and I'm listening to so much stuff, and I can't go through it all. I wish I could, but you know, 2009, like, I meet my girlfriend, and you know, I mentioned in my intro video as well, and she had a pretty decent size vinyl collection, and what that actually was kind of what sparked my interest in actually collecting. Now, up from the point where I got my turntable to when I first met my girlfriend, I had picked up a couple albums here and there. You know, things like maybe like the Weezer, the Rage Against the Machine ones, some Nirvana ones, and just some classic albums like, you know, well, Dark Side of the Moon was my mom's, but Led Zeppelin 4 I picked up, Deep Purple, things like that. So I had a tiny little collection that you could fit in a little box, like probably about that big. And when I saw that she had a pretty large collection, and just what she had in her collection, it was just eye-opening. You know, I was like, well, I could just start collecting vinyl. You know, so basically in the last, well, since 2009, 4 years or so, I mean, that's where all these records came from, basically. So I've been busy, but anyway, some things that she had exposed me to that I really wasn't into so much, you know, at the time, like Aretha Franklin, Lady Soul. You know, she exposed me to a lot of soul music. Otis Redding as well. Terry Reid. Move over for Terry Reid. This album is, I mean, this is some good stuff. Talking Heads, even. You know, my girlfriend's a little bit older than me as well too, so I mean, she definitely had kind of her own, you know, musical upbringing too, and she definitely exposed to a lot more music, and she was definitely a bigger fan of like the 80s pop music, and so something that, you know, with listening to a lot of this rock and stuff, I kind of avoided on purpose, and I'm just kind of in the last year or so kind of just warming up to it some more. But you know, you know, Michael Jackson, Bad, but not just this kind of stuff, but just pretty much any 80s kind of anything really, even just like Echo and the Bunnymen and stuff, although I've kind of liked them for a while, but yeah, just things like that, you know, Purple Rain, Prince, and also some good jazz too. She exposed me to Dave Brubeck, Time Out, Take 5. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of my first kind of introduction to proper jazz music. You know, it's just she was really into that. You know, Miles Davis kind of blew as well. You know, stuff that I never really thought twice to kind of listen to. But you know, since then, I mean, it's just been kind of the same thing where and I'm just exposing myself to a whole bunch of music via, you know, the internet, and now like the VC and stuff is just exposing me to a whole bunch of different stuff. That's all I got to show for today. I mean, this is probably going on for way too long, but you know, maybe I can kind of continue that, you know, some more from where I left off here, but I think I'll save that for maybe another video. So hope you're all doing well. Thanks for watching so much if you made it this far. Take care. Peace.